Hi everyone, very good evening to everyone, and welcome to InfoSec Train first of all. So, guys, today we are here for the webinar of Advanced Penetration Testing, and I am your host for today. So, the thing is, before proceeding to our webinar, let me just introduce myself. My name is Ashish Dhyani, and I'm working as a trainer at InfoSec Train. Talking about my background, my experience, so I have a kind of 8 years of experience in this particular field. And talking about my certifications, so if you know, like there are lots of certificate vendors. So we have EC Council. So from EC Council I have CEH, CND, ECSA, and ECSS also, right? Then apart from EC Council we have CompTIA as well. So from CompTIA, I have taken CSA and also A plus, Network plus, Linux plus, Pentest plus, and Security plus. Right. So all these certifications I have done, and apart from that, at InfoSec Train, I'm taking care of some custom courses that are tailored by us. Right. So those custom courses are like mobile penetration testing, Active Directory penetration testing, advanced penetration testing, right? Web application penetration testing, network penetration testing. So all these are like different custom courses for penetration testings. So I'm just taking care of those as well. So I'm a trainer for all those courses. So in the like in all these courses you might have seen one thing, that it is everything that I'm doing, and it is a kind of penetration testing, right? It is into the s- offensive side of the security, right? So I just do the part of breaking, right? You can say that I break the things and just find out the loopholes and break it, right? So that's my work, right? So that is a bit of introduction about myself. So now the agenda for today's webinar is introduction to penetration testing lifecycle, right? So in that, what we'll do, right? We will just learn that how penetration testing is done, right? Now, all the things that we perform in penetration testing, all the steps that we perform, how those steps are done, right? So those penetration testings and its life cycle we will discuss. Next thing we have is understanding a zero-day exploit. So we will discuss about how 0 days are done, what is a 0 day, and there is an exploit that arrived in 2022 with the name Follina. So we will be exploiting that, we will be performing that exploit. So we have created, like I have created one test bed, right, in a virtualized environment. So inside that you guys will see that how that vulnerability was working, right? So that will do. Then we have some introduction to the macros, right? So if you have heard about Visual Basic scripts and all, and inside the Microsoft Office, so there were macros, right? So we will discuss about macros also, and then we will understand the Empire framework. That what is Empire framework, how you will, if you want to install it, how you will install it, and what are the components and how you will use it, right? So this is pretty much the agenda for today's webinar, today's meeting, and we will cover all of this, right? Now, starting with our agenda, the first thing is penetration testing life cycle or penetration testing phases. Thing is that whenever we talk about penetration testing life cycle, so the life cycle of the penetration testing cannot be same for everyone, right? Yes, if you are following a framework that is given by any organization, or like any any of the document is there, or if it is a standard that you are following, then your penetration testing life cycle will be same. But if you have your own penetration testing process and you are just following your life cycle of penetration testing, then at that time you will determine your own process, right? So what happens, these steps that I have written, these steps that you can see in the life cycle of penetration testing, what these steps are, these are the general steps that every penetration tester just follows, or it can be like with a different name, but everyone follows this. Now, penetration testing, when we are talking about penetration testing, what happens? Let's say there is a software, right? Let's say you are using a software, right? So, like you might have used Google Chrome, right? Everyone uses Google every day. So, you might have installed Google Chrome in your device, right? Now, this software does what? This software is a browser that takes you to the internet and it allows you to access different websites, different web servers to gather information for you, right? So, what you do, you basically just open Google. Google takes you to the internet, to the different links that are there, whatever you have searched, right? So, it took you to the internet, and then on internet, you are doing what? You are just finding out different links and reading the stuff, or if you want to just go for movies or something, like anything you want to search, you can do that, right? Now, this Google Chrome, what if this Google has all your information, right? All your personal information, whatever information you have provided. So when we are talking about this Google Chrome and this information, what if someone else gets to know about your information? Let's say you have saved your credit card details online or some passwords online. Your username is there, your lots of stuff is there, your pictures online, like we save it in cloud nowadays, right? We have Google Photos, so we save the things over cloud so that even if we just change or our mobile phone or device, so that the data is there so we can retrieve it back from the cloud, right? What if someone gets that data? That is a kind of thing that should not happen, right? So the thing is, when we are talking about penetration testing in this software, there can be some ways that an attacker can just find out a way to get inside, get the access of this, the admin access of this Google Chrome, and get all the credentials that are saved, right? So before the attacker finds out, any malicious person, attacker, I'm referring to any malicious person having malicious intent, bad intent, right? So before attacker finds out that there is a vulnerability or there is some way by which we can just get inside the target, right, and get the information from there, after getting the information, the attacker can just sell that information over dark web or that place, right? So before attacker gets that, we have to find out that loophole and fix it, right? So finding that loophole in the whole software, in the network, or in the physical your the network, or your physical security, like you have security guards, CCTV cams, anyone can bypass that. And like in humans, if you want to find out that, so all these things, the testing of all these things is known as penetration testing, right? Now, if we go like the way we say the formal words, right? So in that we can say that finding out the vulnerabilities, right, and fixing them, right? So there is one more thing in which we find out the vulnerabilities, and that thing is known as vulnerability assessment. Now, what can be the difference between vulnerability assessment and penetration testing? Is there any difference or both are the same things? So why we are doing different things? right? If both of the things are same, why the different name is given? Now, what happens when we are talking about vulnerability assessment? So, in vulnerability assessment, what we do, we have automated tools. Like you might have heard about Metasploit framework, right? Metasploit framework is created by, any idea? Metasploit framework, the owner of Metasploit framework is Rapid7, right? Rapid7 is what is, it's an organization who created this tool, Metasploit framework. Same like that, they have a scanner also with the name Rapid7, a very like it's a very costly scanner, and like you can purchase for the organization, and organizations they purchase it for the vulnerability assessment. So that automated tool can do what? If you just run an assessment, right? So if you execute one assessment, so what it will do, it will not exploit the vulnerabilities, but it will, on the basis of like the version of the things that you are using, it will try to communicate with the target, and on the basis of that, it will just give you the list of vulnerabilities that are there in your system, right? Or in your whole network, or in your like application, right? So for web application, we have different scanners, right? Like we have Acunetics web vulnerability scanner, that is one of the good tools, right? So all these things we have is done in vulnerability assessment, right? We are not exploiting any vulnerability, we are just assessing what vulnerabilities arise and what vulnerabilities are there. On the other hand, we have penetration testing, in which we do use tools for scanning tools, we do use. But when vulnerability assessment is done, now vulnerability assessment says that you have like you are using SQLite database, right? And the SQLite database is of version 3.33.0, right? Now in that you have a vulnerability. So this report is given by vulnerability assessment. Now in penetration testing, what we do, we exploit that, right? We will do what? We will exploit that vulnerability. If it is exploitable, then in the report we will write that yes, it is exploitable. If it is not exploitable, then in the report we'll say that due to update, the vulnerability does not exist anymore. Like if there is any update and the system is updated, you're not able to exploit it, then you just write this thing, right? So that is penetration testing, vulnerability assessment. And there is one more thing known as red teaming. So what we do in penetration testing, what happens, you get a scope, right? You always get a scope that you have what, you have this much of uh, devices, right? These are the IPs of those devices. You have to test these things only, you cannot test anything, right? Now in red teaming, what happens, you can test the physical security as well, right? You can just go to like a web, like the server room, if you are able to access it, right? You can pick a lock as well, right? Even like you are going to the server room, you, if the server room is open and somehow you are able to bypass it without getting detected, so you can plug a USB in the servers and you can just keep on working, right? You can perform social engineering, you can call some employee of the organization and you can just ask them for information, right? So that is the thing of red teaming. There is no scope in red teaming, but there is a scope in penetration testing, right? So red teamers are, you can say, they try to be stealthy, right? During the red teaming assessment, we have to be stealthy, right? That means you have to stay undetected. You cannot create lots of noises, right? While you do the penetration testing, you are creating lots of logs, you are creating lots of noise in the network so that it somehow you will get detected, or somehow it will alert someone, the administrator or someone, right? But in red teaming, you are not doing that, right? You are just emulating yourself as an adversary. Adversary means the attacker, right? So you are emulating yourself as an adversary. So adversary emulation happens over there, in which we do what, we have different frameworks. We use command and control servers, and like if you have heard about Caldera, right? So Caldera is one of the framework that is used, and Cobalt Strike is there, right? And Posh C2 is also there. So these are the things that are used. So for adversary emulation, we use Caldera. Then Cobalt Strike is again a command and control server, right? Posh C2 is open source, but it's also a command and control server, right? So that is the thing that we do in red teaming, right? Now let's move on to this life cycle. Let's see what this life cycle tells. In this life cycle, what happens? We have the very first step as planning. So in the planning phase, what happens? This is the first phase of the penetration testing. So whenever you go for penetration testing, planning is important, right? So in planning phase, scope of the test is determined. That what is the scope, like in which system test is done, the test will be done, how it should be done, who will perform the test, what will be the time frame that you will get, what should be the benefit to the organization. All these things are checked in planning phase of penetration testing, right? Correct. So we sign non-disclosure agreement as well, all the approvals, and if there are any extra needs like service level agreement is also there, like, right? So SOW is also there. So lots of things are there. So all the documentation work and the work that should be done using, like, uh, you can say, lots of paperwork, right? That should be done. It will be done in planning phase, right? Now in planning phase, we have done that. We know what is the scope, what things you will test, what not to test, what to touch, what not to touch, right? Then the second phase arrives as reconnaissance. Now reconnaissance is also called footprinting. It is also called information gathering, right? And fingerprinting also. Now, in this reconnaissance phase, what happens after the scope of the test is done? This is the second phase in which information gathering about target network is done, right? As much of information possible you will gather in this phase, right? You will use OSINT, right? Which stands for open source intelligence, right? So you will use lots of websites, like if I ask you to gather information about infosec train, so you will do what? You will go to the website of infosec train, right? You can go to the social media, right? You can go to the for domain researching, you can go for, you can do who is lookup, right? You can also go for the websites like netcraft, right? You can go for the search engines like census, you have shodan also, right? So all these things you will use, right? You will check the domain name, you will try to find out the DNS, the Wi-Fi key, mail server records, uh, any fingerprinting about the host, lots of things, right? Everything that you will find out that is inside information gathering, right? Now information gathering is it can be done for the servers also, it can be done for the users also, the devices also. So you have to figure out different ways where you can find what, right? So that is our reconnaissance phase, right? Now after reconnaissance phase, what we do, we have exploration phase, right? Now we have to explore the environment, right? when we do the when we do the scanning for open ports, right, after that we do exploration, right? In that exploration, let's say you found open port, that there is port number 80 open, right? Now in that port number 80 that you found as open, you will use that port to do what, to enter the network and explore the network more deeply, right? So we do what, like being like penetration testers, we just scan the network for finding out different network devices, firewall rules, right? So you can do, like in this exploration, we just explore the host, the services, the platform, everything, right? What platform, what services the host is using, if the host is there, how many hosts are there. Because what we need to know that if I found a vulnerability, right? Let's say we did the scanning, we found some open port. We should know that where it will land me, right? Now let's say what happens, like you are doing a scanning part, right? After scanning, you just got to know that port number 21 is open, FTP. Now if it took you to FTP server, and that server just gives you nothing, no output, no data, it was just a trap for the attacker, right? So you will be trapped, your tactics, your techniques will be understood, right? So that's why we have to know, we have to explore that environment, right? So we have to explore and find out what all things are there. Then after exploring the whole environment, we move on to the vulnerability assessment part. So in vulnerability assessment, we do what? We find out the threats that are there for our organization, right? So when we are talking about threats, threats are what? Like anything that can lower my asset value, that can alter my asset value, right? Assets are what? Every that thing is an asset which holds some value for you. Now the thing is, if you have a laptop right now and you think it is an asset for you, right? So water is threat for laptop, right? If your laptop is not waterproof, then water is threat, right? So it will stop functioning, your laptop will not work. Now this laptop will give you nothing, right? So the value of your asset is down, right? So that is threat, right? Now the thing is, we have in vulnerability assessment, we find out all the threats. Now these threats are what? These are the vulnerabilities, right? And vulnerabilities are what? These are the weaknesses of the system, right? So vulnerability assessment is the process in which we compute, rank, and pinpoint the vulnerabilities in the system. Penetration testers do what? Penetration testers, they use automated tools for known vulnerabilities, and these tools just use updated databases from the like they have the latest vulnerabilities and their details, they just start attacking, right? So that is your vulnerability assessment part, right? Now, after that, after vulnerability assessment, we'll go for exploitation, right? Exploit the known vulnerabilities. Great. So the vulnerabilities that we found in vulnerability assessment, that this environment may be vulnerable to these all vulnerabilities. We will pick up the report of vulnerability assessment and we will start exploiting those vulnerabilities if they are exploitable or not, if to find out the genuinity of the vulnerability, right? Now this is a most difficult phase in penetration testing, right? You have to find out what kind of attack will work, what's according to the services that are running, this file format that the target machine will just support. What you can, like, you cannot send a Linux script to a Windows machine. It will never execute and you will never get access, right? So that is what we have to figure out, right? And during the exploitation phase, the very last information that you have gathered, every single information will be used, right? In exploitation part, exploitation is what it is, like finding out vulnerabilities and exploiting those vulnerabilities. In exploitation part, we have one more thing which is with the name privilege escalation. What we are doing in privilege escalation, we are just elevating our privileges, right? So what we are doing, in privilege escalation, what we have is, let's say we have this user, right? So this is I'm drawing a triangle, right? Now the three different sides of triangle, this is user 1, this is user 2, and this is root. Now user 1 can access the database, right? It has the privileges that it can access database. User 2 can access web server, right? So it cannot access database, but it can access the web server. And there is root user that can access anything. So privilege escalation is what? If you are moving from user 1 to user 2, that means from a normal user, you are again moving on as a normal user, right? So this is called what? This is called horizontal privilege escalation, right? When you want all the accesses, so you want to be root is like god, right? Root is the god mode. So in that, what you do, you basically try to be the root user, and if you find any vulnerability and be the root user, so that is called what? That is called vertical privilege escalation. Clear? So moving from a normal user to a normal user, that is horizontal privilege escalation, and moving from user 1 to root or any normal user to root, that means your vertical privilege escalation, right? So that is also the thing that is inside the exploitation part, right? Now, after we have done exploitation, then we have reporting. So in reporting, what we do in reporting phase, we create the reports, right? and we give it the severity score as well, that how much severe the vulnerability is, how much impact it can give to the environment, right? So all that information we give in reporting phase. Now the last phase that we have is a recommendation. Now in recommendation, what happens, it's not that everyone knows about everyone does the recommendation, right? There may be some people who just give the recommendation, there may be there are some people who don't give the recommendation. They will just say that my work is done and now your blue team will find out that how to patch this vulnerability, right? So that is recommendation phase, right? That upgrade the version, don't use this tool, right? Or use firewall in front of it, or use IPS intrusion prevention system there, right? So all those things will be done in the recommendation phase, right? So we can give the severity score on the basis of like low, medium, high, and critical, right? So if it is low, then we will give it low score. Then if it is high or medium or like critical, then we give that score also, right? So this is what we do in the recommendation phase, right? Now in this whole process, your vulnerability is found and exploited and patched. Now the next thing is this: zero day. So zero day is what? When we are talking about zero day, we have not only zero day vulnerability, but we have zero day attack, zero day exploit, and zero day vulnerability, right? So in zero day, what happens when, let's say, you have mm, one software application, right? You are the owner of an organization, you have one software application. You tested it, you didn't found any vulnerability, right? You said that it is okay, now we can deploy it, right? Now after you have deployed it, you think there is no vulnerability. So in your system, what happened, attacker arrived, attacker did a very deep research and found that there is a vulnerability and there is a problem, right, in the software or any application. Now in that, what you will do, you don't know there is vulnerability, right? So what attacker can do, attacker can just exploit and get the access. But what will happen when your team will arrive? Let's say the attack happened, we got some alert, so from that we just do what, we will find out the vulnerability. Now we don't know about the vulnerability which is there, that's why we call it zero day, because first you have to find out that which vulnerability is there, right? You don't even know about the vulnerability till now, right? And then you have to do the remediation also, what thing is getting detected, what, how it is working, what the attacker exploited, everything, right? Great. Now I have written zero day attack, zero day exploit, zero day vulnerability. So zero day vulnerability is what? It is a vulnerability or software or a flaw in the software in which attackers can target with malicious code, right? Then we have zero day exploit. So zero day exploit is what? It is a tactic or technique of the attacker to leverage the vulnerability to attack a system, right? So we are doing what? We are leveraging the vulnerability to attack a system. That is zero day exploit. Zero day attack is what? When attacker does what? Attacker releases a malware to exploit software vulnerability before the software developer has patched the flow. Now, when we are talking about 0 days, so 0 day arrive at 0 day. That means you have 0 days to patch it. You have to just find out the problem and patch it as soon as possible, right? You have to detect the things, what things were getting bypassed, right? So everything you will check. That is the thing that you will do. Now, the thing is, when we are talking about 0 day, right? So very famous 0 day happened in on like kind of 28th or 30th May, right? So like talks were started back in the April also. Then there was no issue. Then after that, the issue arrived. So the name of that vulnerability that I'm talking about, that is Follina. So CVE is what? CVE is a number, right? CVE stands for Common Vulnerability and Exposures, right? So what happens whenever a new exploit arrives in the market, whenever like there is new test bed created and the error created, right? Or new vulnerability is there. So every vulnerability gets this CVE number. Now in that CVE number, how you will read it, in the front, the CVE is written. After that, the year of release is written, and then the number is given, right? So that is Folena. Now, this CVE number was given to Folena. What happened? This vulnerability was having like was inside MSDT, right? Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool, right? So what it was doing, it was invoking a remote attacker using Microsoft Office document to execute arbitrary code using MSDT executable, right? You might have seen whenever something went wrong with your device, so it starts a window with the name troubleshooter window. So that troubleshooter window does what? In that MSDT is working. Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool. What Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool does, it just collects the information from your system that what all things are giving error, all the files it will capture, and then it will give it to the internet so that you can find out solution over the internet for that, right? So these are the things that we have in MSDT. Now this vulnerability was inside MSDT. What was happening? I will being an attacker, I will do what? I will create one document, one Word document, Microsoft Word document, right? And now after sending that document to you, I can take the access of your Windows machine. That I'm able to, if you open that particular Microsoft Word file, I'm able to access your device, right? It will open the diagnostic tool for you. It will give you error that this thing is not working, and after that you get everything, right? So how that attack basically works. Now in this we have like I have written the name, the Follina vulnerability. So I have a system, right? So I have this device, right? And this is the attacker. Now attacker does what? Attacker creates new file with the extension .docs, right? Attacker sends it to the victim. Victim just downloads it, accesses it, and the work is done, right? But what is happening in the background? So this is the vulnerable server and this is the attacker, right? Now this attacker did what? Attacker sent a malicious Word document to the server, right? So I'm sending a malicious Word document. After that, victim opens the Word document. Office 365 request, right, will be used for remote HTML file and URL protocol. So at that time, the stream will work, and then the remote HTML file that the attacker has sent, in that the file of the request will be done what? Like there will be a request written inside that file, right? Now that request will be satisfied, right? So what happens? I'm just calling a malicious file from that document that I have sent. So once the user will open that document will be having like the link to download some HTML file, right? Now when we went to the internet, it automatically downloaded some code for you. Then you can spawn your Microsoft MSDT process, right? Then you can run your base 64 encoded PowerShell command, right? And then you can check the user information. You can just put backdoors over there, or you can do what? You can just go for lots of things, right? So that is how. Now here, if you can see, there is written attack kill chain, right? So in this attack kill chain, what happens? Like now, if you will do the attack that I'm talking about, if you will perform that attack right now, it will get detected, because quickly the Microsoft did what? They just sent one update, right? And using that update, we were getting what? We were getting the malicious file detected. So it will just detect that malicious file. Now, one more important thing you might have seen. Whenever you open any Microsoft Office document, right? Be it a PowerPoint, be it any like Word document or Excel document, whenever you open it, what you get over there? At the top, you get something, an option that says enable editing. This option, enable editing. Whenever you get someone sends you a document and you just open it for the first time. Now, what was happening? This option, having this option was safe, right? Why? If you are not allowing that enable editing, right? If we are not allowing that, attacker is not getting the access of our machine. Do you know that? After the person has selected enable editing, only then your this thing will work. Your attacker will get the access, right? So that's the thing. Now, the next thing is when we are talking about this Follina, right? Like some days later, it was found that, yeah, like if you don't enable editing, you're not hacked. So at that time, what happened? Attackers, they found, rather than, like, let's say my file name is malicious, right? So rather than naming it malicious.docs, let's name it malicious.exe. RTF. Heard of RTF? Rich text format. Now, when you were sending the malicious document as this rich text format, you were getting what? You were getting enable editing option when you were sending a document docs file. Change it to RTF and you will not get that enable editing option. It will just open directly. For editing, it has the access, right? So attackers did what? They started exploiting this vulnerability with .rtf, and then Microsoft just revealed that now all the malicious things will be checked in Windows and you will not be able to download anything, right? So that is how we work with these things. Now what I have is I have this environment, right? So this is my Kali Linux from which I will be attacking. So how I created the test bed, how I created the environment, I I just have one Kali Linux and I have this Windows machine. I have named it Follina only, right? So this Windows machine is there and this Kali Linux is there, right? Now we have to make that Windows machine vulnerable. So I did what? I just installed Microsoft Office in it, right? And I allowed editing and everything, right? In Kali Linux, I installed like one test bed, one pre-written code, right? That you can say, right? So the code is available on GitHub, right? Right. So you guys can also create this environment. Now the thing is, what I have done, I have not fully just created that Windows machine like this, right? Like I have not just gone for the whole process of installing that Microsoft Office. So if you have heard, there is something with the name Office Deployment Tool, right? So I have used Office Deployment Tool and I have deployed this thing, right? So let me just show you that what we are talking about. Okay. So what I have is I have like, if we go for this, right? So it will open the file explorer for me, and inside that if you see the download, so there is like Office Deployment Tool. You just have to download this Office Deployment Tool and it will deploy the Microsoft Office in your system, right? So that's what you guys will do. Now after deploying that, what I will do, I will just use like one a tool that the link that I shared with you guys, right? And using that tool will tell me that, yeah, how to access the things, right? So let's start with the attacking part, right? Now in the attacking part, what I will do, um, I have this Kali Linux, right? So this thing is done now, right? I've logged in. So there is a directory with the same name, right? MSDT Follina. So I have this Follina.py, right? This is the script, this is the code. right? So if I show you the code, this is the code that is running, right? So if you will read the code, like lots of these are all the direct like libraries that are being used, and it is created on Python environment, right? After getting that, what we can see is command to run on the target, lots of things. If you scroll down, so you can see past the supplied interface, this is done so that malicious document knows what to reach out to, right? So here we are telling that what is the IP address, what is the interface, so that the malicious document will know from where it has to download some HTML files, right? Now, uh, this code copy the Microsoft Word skeleton into temporary staging folder, right? So the word will be copied, then rebuild the original Office file, and then the encoding will be done. So here we are base encoding as base 64. So base 64 encoding is being used, and there you will get the access. What you will do is, let me just do one thing. Great. Now in this we can see what we can see. We have Follina.py, right? So if I write /Follina.py, or if I write Python 3 space Follina.py, right? So it says what? Copied staging doc, created malicious doc serving HTML payload on port 8000, right? What it did, it just basically created the malicious document, right? I can stop that. If I do ls, so I can see Follina.doc is created. This is the malicious document. Can you read anything? Are you guys able to read anything, understand anything over here? No, right? Because it is encoded, right? That is what is inside the malicious document that you have created, right? Now, inside that malicious document, this is the thing. What I will do is the malicious document will now be shared with the target. How I will share it? You have different ways you can share, right? You can send it over email, WhatsApp, any other link, any like you can just send a link that you have won a lottery kind of thing, like many links arrive, and when you click on that, it starts downloading something. So same like that, you can send it to anyone, right? So attackers do that, they send it to anyone, and then what happens? You get the access. Now let's see how you will upload it. What I will do right now, I'm in the same network. So I'm doing what? I'm making my Kali Linux as a server, right? So the like the command for that is service Apache to start, right? And after that, I will copy Follina.doc, the malicious document, to the /var/www/html folder. Now it is copied, right? After copying it, what I will do, I will create a malicious link, and then I will send it to the target, right? So those things will happen, right? So the link I will share, like using bit.ly, I will create a malicious link, and inside that what will be written, my IP will be there, right? So I will write here directly the IP of mine, my Kali Linux, and slash Follina.talk, right? So can you see it is downloaded now? If I go to the folder where I have downloaded it, here it is, Microsoft Word document it is, right? Now, here in our Kali Linux, what attacker will do? Attacker will start listener. Attacker will try to connect, right? So how the attacker will try to connect? Attacker will run that same command again, right? So what I will do is I will just open that, right? Let's see if it works now because it's a very old vulnerability, right? So if I open this document, it's taking a while. And we can see that it is starting Microsoft Word, right? Now when this will be started, can you see enable editing option is there at the top? Are you getting anything here? Any error or anything? No, you're not, because it is inside protected view, right? When I click on enable editing, what will happen? You will get an error. Now this time the error is due to the space, right? Because it's trying to find some space for that file, right? But what will happen is, because it will need to download the things, right? So let me just remove some things so that space will be there. Okay. Now I think some of the space would be freed because I deleted some bits, lots of things. Now let's try to open it again and let's see what happens. Great. So it is under processing and we can see it's open, right? And I click on close. Am I getting anything? Any error or anything? Now let's see if we are able to connect to it. So I will do what? I will write -c, right? And let's try to open notepad.exe in the target machine, right? Now here if you will see, it's waiting, right? Either it is downloading some bits or it is downloading lots of things, right? Now what will happen? You can see that serving HTML payload on and Follina.doc is created the malicious document, right? So it will give me the access. But do you guys know why it is not giving me the access? Because a new Follina.doc is created, right? And it is using, my target machine is using the older one. So what you can do is you can send a fresh document, right? So if I remove this one, and if I just go to the same directory, right, and go here, and if I copy this Follina.doc to HTML again and go back to the Windows. Now in this, one more thing I have done, that is what, that is I have just closed the antivirus, right? Now why I have closed the antivirus? Because what was happening, the like 2-3 days later, this vulnerability was patched, right? And when this vulnerability was patched, then at that time there was what, like it was just accessing when you are trying to, like, you are looking that I have just done what, I have downloaded it, but my browser, like if my firewall and antivirus protection is off, and all those things, but if it is on, it will not allow me to even download, right? Right, so this thing we have opened. Now it is not giving me error, but it will give you an error to you guys, because this machine has like less space, right? So due to less space, it is not giving us error. But this is how your document will look like, and it will open. So we can see that it is what, it is a kind of like genuine looking document, right? And the command for getting the access, if you want to get the access, and the command for that is here, right? So can you see lots of requests are sent from our machine to the target machine, right? That get this option, get this option, get this request, like download this file. So it is doing what, it is downloading all those files what my machine is telling it to do, right? So my machine is telling that download this HTML file. Yes, it is downloading that in the backend, right? My machine is telling just open Notepad. So it will like after some time it will open Notepad, right? If you want to get reverse shell, right? So the command for that is Python 3 space Follina.py -r, and on port number 9999 you will get the access of that, right? So your machine will be just on the listening mode, right? Then after that your target machine will do what, your target machine will try to connect, right? So this Windows, this will try to connect to the Kali Linux machine, and you can get the access, right? That's how this vulnerability works. Now this is how the Follina vulnerability works, right? Now the thing is, when we are talking about this Follina, right, there were other vulnerabilities also, Heard of log4j? So it is related to the Java, right? Log4j was a vulnerability that was at hype. Lot of hype was there, right? Everyone was just talking about log4j because it was a 0 day and someone just executed it, and it was working everywhere, not even one place, but it was working everywhere whenever we need, right? Now the thing is, do you guys know that like when at that time when log4j was there, we were also just doing one penetration testing assignment, right? So we were just performing penetration testing for one organization, and like that's what we found inside their environment also. Now in log4j there was version 2, right? Version 2 was vulnerable, right? And when we talk about version 1, some of the organizations, they were using version 1 of that particular log4j, and the people who were using the version 1, they were safe from the attack, right? So log4j was there. There was one more spring for shell, right? So spring for shell is again for Java and related to log4j again, right? So that was the vulnerability. Then again, there were lots of vulnerabilities in Azure, right? And like Azure environment, Azure cloud, right? Then there was a vulnerability in network file system of this Windows, that it was a buffer overflow vulnerability. If you have heard about this attack, buffer overflow, right? So all these vulnerabilities, these are the 0 days. So you can create one test environment. Like you cannot create a test environment for Azure because Azure, like, it has upgraded now, right? So you cannot create that environment for that, for buffer for cloud environments, but for these environments you can create all those test beds and you can try it by yourself, that how these things are working, right? Like in Linux, you can just install a Linux, right? An older version of Linux, and you will get to know that there was a vulnerability with the name syslog, right? So that vulnerability you can exploit. So you can try out working with all these vulnerabilities. So like these are the test beds that I have also created for, like, for the sessions. So that's why you guys can also create that, right? Now next thing, this is about Follina. Now next thing is macros. Now when we are talking about macros, so you might have seen that you have been working with the Excel file, Microsoft Excel. So you're working in Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word, right? And you are performing a task that you wish that I wish that it can be automated, right? That kind of wish. So in this Excel, we get what? Like this was the issue before, right? That was faced by the users when Microsoft Office was new. Now Microsoft Office just came to a solution for this by creating macros, right? So macros are what? These are just visual basic scripts that can be, like, you can just like craft them and share them. And the best thing for attackers is it works in background, right? So if it is enabled, If I send you some macro script, and if it is enabled inside, like macros is enabled inside your system, you will not know that there is a process running in the background in your system. That's what it can do, right? So that is a macro. Now why we call them, like why we are calling like talking about macros, why we are doing this thing? Because these are dangerous. Macros are what? Macros are dangerous, right? Why they are dangerous? As I said, that they can do what? They can run scripts in the background that can be like altered and shared, right? So what attackers do is they just generate a very genuine looking file in the Microsoft Office. Then they open up the macros editor and then craft a script that will do what? That will generate a session from the target user to the attacker, right? So that is the basic flow of things in the macros. Clear? Now, when we talk about macros, right? Like macros can be like we can hack using macros. We can do lots of things using macros, right? So how it can be hacked? How we can just use it? So the first thing is how we can spread it, right? So can we use phishing emails to spread our macros, like the macro that we have created? File from internet, someone can download, right? File from a network, right? Now how they work, right? So what they do, these viruses or macros, right? There are macro viruses also, there are macros also, right? So they work by embedding malicious code inside documents like spreadsheets or other data, right? And it can infect your computer by replacing ordinary commands with malicious code, right? And if you have a macro inside your system, a malicious macro, right, you can just activate it by performing like everyday task. You are editing a word document, you are opening your email, and it is activated, right? So it will perform a lots of tasks in your system, and it can also give the access to the attacker, right? It can just do the flashing of your system, right? So like flashing is what? Heard of PDOS? PDOS stands for permanent denial of service, right? So that it can do, we call it flashing, when you crash the hardware of the system using some code and you permanently just crash it, right? So that it can do. How to just know that I have macro enabled, or how I have macro in my system? If you like, whenever you look at the documents, right, in those documents, if you go for like the formatting, right, if the formatting is altered or deleted, or additional images or new files are created, you can say that it is work of macro, right? The computer is asking to save some documents, computer is displaying strange error messages, or let's say your computer is slower as normal, right? So all those things, make sure like your computer becomes slow even when you are on a threshold to fill your C drive also, right? If your C drive is full, then also your computer gets slow. So make sure that is not the case, and then you can just detect it, right? So this is the thing about macros. Now, for exploiting using macros, we have different frameworks, different things, right? So we have what we have Empire framework, right? You can use Empire. Now, with Empire, like you can just create macro, send it to someone, and you can enable them. You have something with the name Magic Unicorn. You can use that also. It will also create a macro, right? Using MSF Venom also, you can create a macro, right? So you just have to provide that what kind of thing you want, and you will create your macro will be created. Then there is something with the name Lucky Strike, right? So Lucky Strike is what it is also the tool that is used to just uh, go for macros and just exploit using macros, right? So these are all the things inside macros, right? So Lucky Strike, Macro Pack is also there, Evil Clipper is also there, right? How we can just mitigate this thing, the hacking using like if some organization just wants the opinion, right, that how to just mitigate this, what you will say. Now the thing is, first you have to disable the macro, right? In the office environment, the macros should be disabled, right? Now you have to write some feature, you have to enable some feature that will block the macros, right? Now if the usage of macros is unavoidable, what we'll do then? So only enable those users or groups that absolutely need to use the capabilities of macros. Not everyone should get that, right? Not everyone should get the access and should get the macros enabled in their systems, right? So that is what, that is one more thing about macros, right? Now the next thing that we have is Empire. So when we are talking about Empire, Empire is what? It is a tool, post exploitation tool. You can use it in Windows also, Linux also, Mac also, right? What it does when we are talking about Empire, right? So it is a PowerShell post exploitation agent, and it is just built on secure communication, right? It has a very flexible architecture also, right? And like this PowerShell Empire was created by the PowerShell Empire project, but it is not maintained by them anymore, right? So there is like organization with the name uh, BC Security, right? So BC Security is now handling this Empire framework, right? Now in this Empire framework, what we have, it has like agents, right, for Linux, right, and like Windows also, for Mac also, right? And on Python 3 it is working, it has agents, it has C sharp agents, right? C sharp is a like language, right? So Empire is what? Empire is a tool that is similar to Metasploit, but it is specific to PowerShell. So it allows you to run PowerShell script in memory and make a connection back to your attacking machine, right? That's what Empire can do. Now, Empire has few things, right? Some components. So what components are there? There is a listener, right? So now, what is listener? Listener does what? Listener is a local process that listens for connection from the machine we are attacking, right? So if this is my Linux machine and this is the victim machine, so I will start listening on this attacking machine that listen for any connection. Then we also have stager, right? So when we are talking about stager is what? It is a piece of code that will do what? That will upload agent to the target. So it will do what? It will upload agent to the target. Agent is what? Agent means payload, right? Payload means the code that we are trying to send, right? So it is a program that will maintain the connection between your computer and the target, right? That is your agent, right? So agent is like a process, you can also call it process running in the target machine, the victim machine, that will connect to your listener. So what I did, I created a payload. I sent that payload to the target machine. Now that payload is executing in the target and then it is getting connected to my machine so that I can get the access of the target machine, right? And one more thing that is there is module, right? So module is what? When we talk about module, these are what? These are like are malicious commands which can just harvest credentials, it can escalate or our privileges, right? So these are the codes that are executed by the agent on the target machine to achieve our goals, right? Let's say the goal for the attacker is to just find out like some data and copy some data, right? So that we can do using the Empire framework, right? Now inside this Empire framework, you can create your own server as well, you can create your own client as well, right? Now the command for installing this Empire framework, so if you are using Kali Linux, right? So in Kali Linux it is very easy to install like this Empire framework, right? So the command is like apt install and PowerShell -empire, right? So it will install the Empire. If you are using any other system, so what you can do, you can go to this link and you can run the git clone command. Now, when we talk about Metasploit framework, Mr. Arpreet, this Metasploit framework is not specific to any kind of operating system. But this Empire framework does what? This Empire is just for like for executing the PowerShell commands, right? So if you want to execute PowerShell commands in your target system, then you will use Empire framework, right? And it also does the work of like we can also create a server of there, right? And you will get what? You will get all those things like your listeners payload, and you have the server as well, so the server can communicate with the other devices that you have compromised, and then it does its work, right? So that is Empire. Now instead of Empire, what I generally use, I use like for command and control, as a command and control server, and for adversary emulation also. Both things are done, right? So what I use, I prefer Caldera, right? So it is used for like adversary emulation also. So I prefer that, and sometimes I also use this Empire framework, right? But it's better than all the others. Like I have told you, Unicorn as well, and others like Lucky Strike as well. But Empire is the oldest one, so it's better in doing all those things, right? So using that, what you can do using Empire, you can get the foothold in the machine, right? And then you have lots of listeners. So you have HTTP listener, you want to listen on which port, a Dropbox listener is also there, and then Meterpreter payloads are also there, right? And there is a listener with the name Meterpreter also, right? So it will do what? It will just go for like your listening part, right? It will start listening on HTTP port, and then it will send, it will inject the Meterpreter payloads in the target machine, right? So that's how we use this Empire framework. And after that, what all information you will need, like you want to inject something, you want to steal some token, you want to get the shell, everything will be received by you, right? So that is your PowerShell Empire framework, right? Great. Now, this was it for today. For the this was the agenda for today's webinar, right? So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you guys learned something new today, and you guys will try and perform these exploits as well.